Greetings to all of you. I am thrilled and excited to again be in conversation with Betsy Polatin. And we have a great topic today. We're going to be talking about lightness of being and all of the layers of what that means. Thank you for being here again today, Betsy.
Oh, Heather, it's my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. And I want to start by saying how grateful I am for what you're doing. The videos and the people that you interview and the concepts offered to us and that we're blessed with. I thank you so much for what you do.
Mm, thank you, Betsy. And the feeling is very mutual. I Let me introduce you and then I'll talk a little bit about why I'm so excited to talk to you today. But let me just read your bio and remind people of your incredible experience and gifts with what you're doing in the world. Betsy is an internationally recognized breathing, movement, and somatic trauma work specialist. She was a professor at Boston University's College of Fine Arts for 25 years. She is the author of the best-selling book, HUMANUAL, An Epic Journey to Your Expanded Self. And I highly recommend for people to get this. It's a brilliant book, Betsy.
Thank you.
Her background includes 45 years of movement education and performance, as well as training in the Alexander technique, yoga, meditation, and spiritual practices, trauma resolution, and the broader healing arts. She leads international trainings where she presents her unique and revolutionary fusion of ideas, scientific knowledge combined with ancient spiritual wisdom, universal forces, and intuitive human creativity. And she co-teaches with Peter Levine and Gabor Maté. So, I mean, your experience and background is extraordinary, Betsy. And part of what I really value in your work, and I'm excited to be in conversation with you again, is because of your integrative understanding of body, mind, spirit, and how we can only come into wholeness by integrating all of those facets of ourselves. And that too often, as we were talking about before we got on the recording, the body is split off and minimized in terms of its part in the wholeness.
Right, right. And on some level, it is square one of the whole, if we look at the foundationally, it's a foundation that everything is built on because the, the largest nerve in the body is the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve has 80% of its fibers going from the body to the brain, and only 20% from the brain to the body. So that just tells us our design, our creation is to receive from the body. And that tells us how we think, feel, behave, etc. And so that kind of tells us.
Well,
So,
and part of what's profound in what we're going to be talking about today is how can we come into that lightness of being as we're moving into the Aquarian Age. And I
yeah,
think part of the meaning of the Aquarian Age is reconnecting with the sacredness of the body and the
absolutely.
sacredness of the earth that
Ab-
grounds us and grounds our embodiment. And I think that's some of the rebalancing of the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine.
Yes, yes, exactly. Because yes, what is embodiment going to look like in the Aquarian age, in the new earth? And we know from so many teachings that we lost lightness, we lost the connected frequency somewhere along the way. In all the cultures have stories on that. We all agree it happened. And so now, as you talk about with the astrology, we know, and the cycle, the processional cycle that you explained so beautifully, we know that a change is coming. We know that it's happening. And so that supports us to really go with it, I think.
Well, and we were talking earlier about that higher frequency, which is the frequency of unity consciousness, of love.
Yes.
And we were talking about my conversation with Keone Hanalei and how we can no longer see or experience Lemuria because it disappeared because we weren't at the frequency that we could resonate with
Right.
that energy of love. And that's some of moving into the lightness of being is moving into those higher frequencies again.
Yeah, exactly. And as we begin to understand, well, we also talked a little bit about that other cultures have similar stories about the relationship of, I know in Jewish mysticism, they talk about everything is God, and if God disappears, if God goes away, everything disappears. And it's this similar idea of, does God go away or did we go away from God? And so we're sort of coming back to that idea of what we can do to change our frequency and to be in tune with ourselves and the earth and the cosmos and everything. So let's start with the beginning we all had, which is a single cell. So the cell, of course, went on to divide and grow and multiply and split and twist and form pathways and form soft bits and then hard bits to cover the soft bits and tubes and channels. And it looks like a bunch of separate components, but it's not. We are this one entity that has distinctions, but really no separate parts. And if we take the analogy of a balloon vendor in the park who blows up a balloon and then twists it and makes a head and twists it again and makes legs or four legs and then a tail, and then you've got a dog from this balloon, and the parts look different, but it's that one whole balloon. And so that's what we are.
Mm.
And so, if we all just take a moment to ask ourselves, do we really embody or embrace that?
Mm.
I mean, especially these days, I want to say that we talk about the oneness and the wholeness, but do we really get that we were one single cell that just ta-da, you know?
Well, and one of the things you mention in your book is that every cell in the body has consciousness,
Yes.
and every cell has its own, uniqueness, but is a part of this interconnectedness that
Right.
makes us the oneness that we are, and we're the microcosm of the macrocosm.
Right.
That everything has consciousness. We live in a conscious cosmos.
Yes. Yes. So we're this this living body mind self. We're not this sort of static body
Mm.
thing. We're this living somatic self, a bio-intelligent, psycho-spiritual, fascial, crystalline matrix full of these experiences that life gives us. It's amazing. We're so alive. And yet, most of us sort of get up in the morning and go to work and eat our food and try, you
Are
know,
in survival.
yeah. So if we think about that survival, isn't that related to, by the way, I really enjoy your talks with Keone. And he talked about a few sessions ago about the fall and stopping our own ascension. And that's when we're in survival, when we're busy surviving and not ascending. And I think that the ascension that he talks about is, yes, there's a spiritual ascension, but it's also within us. Am I going to ascend in myself or be heavy? And so when I think of that, I think of your beautiful talks of Ma'at and the feather, and so related to the lightness. Like how much do we pay attention to that in life? Or are we just going to wait till we die and look at it then? Oops, instead of on the way. So I thought maybe we could do a little practice that would help bring attention to that. Do you think that would be a good idea?
Beautiful.
Okay. So sitting in a chair, you can sit however you want. You could also do this standing, but I'm going to speak of it sitting because Heather and I are both sitting. So as you're sitting, pivot a little bit forward in your chair and then come back to center, and then pivot a little bit back in your chair and come back to center. And keep doing that so that you go forward a bit, center, back, center. And keep doing that. And as you do it, this is not a physical exercise. We are not doing a manipulative, no pain, no gain exercise. This is a whole living self, body, mind, spirit, moving. And go less forward, less back, less forward, less back, until you find a place that you would call center. Now, we have at the bottom of our torso sitting bones. They're kind of like little rockers. So you don't want to sit on way back there. You don't want to way overarch and sit here. See if you can find the place where that little rocker is just dropping into the chair. And just again, it's not a manipulative, it's a inner something.
It's not about controlling it, it's about feeling it.
Exactly. Thank you. So that's one part. Now let's do another, second part. Lean over to have your weight on one sitting bone. Center. Other sitting bone. Center. And again, it's not a just physical. It's all, who am I over here? Who am I here? What happens to me here? Yeah. And again, less in the side to side, less side, less side, less side, until you find that place where your sitting bones are kind of evenly dropped in. And then renew the front to back, because that probably got a little bit lost. So we have the vertical front up and down and the side to side. And your spine, that cerebral spinal fluid, the elixir, as Keone calls it, and just having some sense of that, the body, mind, spirit, the temple of divinity within you. How is that for you?
Oh, Betsy, that's exquisite. I mean, in that a lot of my teaching builds on the ancient medicine wheel.
Yes.
It's about coming into wholeness.
Yeah.
And it's all about the different directions, but ultimately, how do you come to center, which is where we are in full balance and wholeness and connection to the earth and sky. And you're literally helping us feel that, find our way to that within ourselves.
Yes. And it's so interesting that we have the wherewithal set up to be able to do it, because there are we get certain information from ourselves and other information we don't get. We're not told every minute, oh, your heart is beating, oh, you're digesting, there's information we get and there's other information we don't get, but we get this one. So it must be important.
Well, one of the things, too, that you talk about in your book, Betsy, is how when we have trauma where we're disconnected, then we don't sense into those things or feel those things. And we get caught in, I think you describe it as compression or contraction,
Yes. Yes.
which then blocks us from expanding or attuning to these experiences and messages within us.
Yes. And I think the more understanding that we have that the expansion is available and is part of our design can help that. So let's talk about the idea of tensegrity, because that can help us with that. So the word tensegrity is a combination of the words tension and integrity. And the concept was invented by a man named Kenneth Snelson, who was a sculptor, and he made these sculptures that look like they're floating in space. And the idea or the concept was absorbed by Buckminster Fuller, and he was making the geodesic domes that you see. And so the principle is that there's something that's doing that, and there's something else that's doing that. And there's a balance of forces that arrive at a stable but very dynamic equilibrium. So I could show you. I've brought my tensegrity structure here.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So here we see the elastics they're elastic, so they're pulling in, and the sticks are pushing out. And so there's a dynamic balance, and it's comparable to us in the way that the elasticity is our fascial or muscular system, and these are our bones. Now, of course, one of the interesting things is that the sticks or the bones do not touch each other.
Mm.
Talk a little bit more about that. But we have here this one continuous connective tissue, fascial, living crystal, elastic web forming this suspension and balanced with the push out. And I think it's interesting in, again, something that you talk about with the planets as they are with, we're going into right relationship and
Yeah.
the sacred architecture of all that is. And you also talk about going into a time where there's no power over.
Mm.
And so with this, everything counts.
So it's kind of the balance of the polarities. You've got expansion and contraction. You've got structure and flexibility or fluidity held in that mutuality and balance.
Exactly. And so changes in one part, they're widely distributed. It shows up everywhere. And that's in us. If I bump my arm, it's not just my arm, my whole system goes, oh, I felt that. So it's it's adapted to this global system from head to toe. Or if you're picking up a heavy object, your child or a plant or something, it's not just here, it's your whole system that has to do this. And if one part is out of balance, everything's out of balance. If you stand on like one leg, which most people do, lean into one hip, there's an imbalance, and everything, the whole of us is affected by it. And we know that we can run into trouble from it. And everybody thinks, oh, I really shouldn't do that, but I have to do it, that kind of thing. But the awareness that this is possible, I think is really important to make it part of the picture.
I think that point that you're making too, Betsy, is so important that if any one part is out of balance, it affects the whole. And you talk in your book about how unfortunate it is that our traditional medical systems tend to look at things in isolation when everything is interacting and interconnected. And you also talk about how if our emotions are out of balance, it will affect our body. If our body's out of balance, it will affect our cognitive functioning, our emotions, our spiritual experiences, that it's all a holistic system.
Right. And luckily, by now, a lot of this is, scientifically proven, so to speak, that evidence-based and all that, that's the common term. Oh, evidence-based, there's evidence-based that children like to be with their grandparents. It's evidence-based. That
And it
one,
was intuitionally based all along.
exactly. But now it's scientifically proven, so it's real now. But hey, if that's the way we have to do it, well, that's okay. Yeah, there's so much to what is already there. But again, like you've said in the talks, is we lost sight of it. We lost sight of it. And in a way, we just have to look now. And here we are. And that takes us to the idea of the fascia.
Mm.
Speaking of something that was overlooked until recently, with medical dissection and exploration of how the body works and disease, etc., they would dissect and take the fascia and throw it away and just look at the organs and the muscles and the bones. And the past few decades, really recently in terms of history, fascia is totally important,
Yes.
more than important. So, the other idea, well, it struck me when you were saying about the medical is reducing the physicality to some kind of mechanistic something.
Yes.
And we are so not that. I almost want to even cry or be angry when people refer to anything in us that is not a sacred temple vessel that we are.
And with everything holding consciousness.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And how we have access to ourselves with that. So the fascia. So just under your skin, you have a layer of fascia that's elastic. Just take that in. You're wearing an elastic suit.
Mm.
And so the fascia is a thin casing of connective tissue that surrounds and holds every organ, every blood vessel, every bone, every nerve fiber, every muscle, everything. And it's an intricate three-dimensional web with tubes and channels. And the interesting part. I mean, a lot of it is interesting, but the fascial fibers of our elastic suit are 70% water. So we've talked with your guests and you on the more than 90% molecularly is water with Veda's work, etc. But 70% of that is in your fascia.
Do you want me to pull up the picture of that, Betsy?
Yes, pull up the picture. That's your fascia. And the little sort of places of little like dots or gatherings, those are like dewdrops of water. And they are traveling through all those lines. And the places where it's kind of a watery gel crystalline matrix. And the places where they meet, which to me, I must say, reminds me of Rory Duff and ley,
Ah, the ley
the
lines.
ley lines and the nodes. Like I'm willing to bet, or in years to come, it will all be matched up.
Wow.
We're not there yet, so right now it's my fantasy, so to speak, but that's what I think. But the fluids, those channels have fluid running through them, and they are moving and adjusting all the time. All the time. That three-dimensional matrix according to, I mean, it's easy, sort of easy to understand in terms of movement. You know, if I were to push your skin right there, you would see that fascia move. But with our understanding of our thoughts and feelings, you know, the pictures, etc., like that's happening too, all the time. So we have access to this.
And one of the phrases in your book that really stuck with me is fluidity provides unity.
Yes.
So does the fascia basically keep the whole system in harmonic balance?
Yes, yes. So the fascia is kind of like, we could compare it to like a grapefruit. And the grapefruit has the casing over it. And when you peel a grapefruit, you see that there's like a whitish
The connective tissue.
connective tissue, yes. And for meat eaters who prepare chicken, you see that the connective tissue is that white, sticky, elasticy stuff when you're preparing it. Back to the grapefruit. So you have that connective tissue around the whole grapefruit, and then you break it open and you have these sections, and the sections, of course, have the layer of connective tissue around them. And then when you break open a section, you see those little tiny uh, droplets like of liquid that are in a water sac. And so that's the layers that we have of it. And they're all communicating with each other.
Mm, really amazing. You were referring to Veda Austin's work too, and she sees water as holding that God consciousness. So you're describing how the fascia that's so fluid and 70% water is moving that consciousness throughout our whole system and connecting us to that God consciousness.
All the time.
Mm,
Head to toe, birth to death. It's
beautiful.
it's available. It's available. And it's like, you know, back to the sort of pieces, like we think like the bicep muscle. Oh, this is a muscle. It exists on its own. You know, that's sort of the way people think of things now. Oh, strengthen your bicep kind of thing. It's like, well, the bicep is attached to something else, and attached to something else and attached to something else. And so there is no separation. Or another analogy, in the United States, we have these zip codes for different areas, but it's still one large country. It's not really separated by these codes. So the fascia is a large sensory organ, like a satellite dish, like you were saying, taking in or reflecting the consciousness both inside and of what's around us. And there are 250 million sensory neurons in the fascial system.
Wow.
And this is all very recent research. 250 million sensory. So the possible information that is coming from inside and from outside that is available to us, like you said, that's all consciousness available to us, that when we decide to start paying attention to, is there for us. But again,
how do we tap into that?
yeah. Well, I think one way is to recognize the access we have to the fascial system, the elastic system. I mean, one way is just to, as you're sitting, twist as far as you can to one side, let go, and you snap back.
Mm.
You don't stay there. That elasticity, or take a finger and you just go, it snaps back.
Mm.
So maybe let's all take a minute with that. Just twist to one side as far as you can twist and let go.
Mm.
And try both sides. It seems so simple, but we see examples of it in everyday life. And when we can connect to that, something on a deeper level of connection says, oh yeah. And that kind of takes us to the idea of biotensegrity. So until not that long ago, the past several decades, really, which is, again, a short time in science, did they realize the tensegrity principles of, the expansion, contraction, self-inclusive support underlie the integrity of all biological structures, from genes and cells and arms and legs, are organized with the expansion and contraction of the forces. So this pioneer in the field, an orthopedic surgeon named Dr. Stephen Levine, he coined the term biotensegrity, and to describe the pervasive presence of tensegrity principles in biology. So he was an orthopedic surgeon, and he was operating on people. And what he had learned in school was that we are levers and pulleys and, very mechanistic, which is, as we said before, the medical model is very mechanistic. And so he's operating on people and he's thinking, that doesn't look like a real lever or a pulley to me.
Mm.
When he's, inside. And then he realizes that the bones, they don't touch each other, and so they float. And so that just changes the picture of how we think about ourselves, that we float at joints. And there was another doctor at Donald Ingberger at Harvard University, and he discovered it with cells. When they have cells and they put them on a culture dish, they kind of flatten. But when they release them, they elastic up. he said, just like a tensegrity structure.
Wow.
So it's
Interesting.
so it's the biological organisms are made strong by the resilience and the balance of the tension and compression that's going on all the time. And so Dr. Levin realized that, the accepted mechanics of the body was described by this guy, Borelli, in 1680. And our thinking, nothing's changed. And yet it doesn't fit. Physicality is not mechanistic. We are fluid, soft matter. We're a sacred vessel. We're just not a machine and hard material. We're just not. I mean, it doesn't take much to realize that.
Well, and with everything being a microcosm of the macrocosm, it fits with our increasing understanding of quantum physics also, where everything is interconnected and influencing everything else.
Yeah, yeah. So if we want to again do a little experiment, if you take your hand and and say you're going to take something and bring it to your mouth. So you bend your elbow. Let's do it two ways. This is way number one. You bend your elbow. You're going to bring something to your mouth. Okay. So you're living with a control booth in your head that says, order, this is an order, bring this to your mouth. This produces one effect. Then leave that and just notice it takes a second to leave it. And way number two, sense yourself as one entity, an integrated elastic web of muscles and connective tissue. And you intend to bring something to your mouth, and you're aware that your entire body will change to do it.
Mm.
And your whole body is always informed and participating in the action. So, yes, your elbow will bend, but also your elbow bends, your hips might shift a bit,
Mm.
your head might move a little bit as you have an idea or picture of your whole self. So the thought and action take place in the whole body, mind, spirit self. And you're lighter, more fluid, and less cut off. So way
Mm.
number one is your two separate entities, one part directing another. And way number two is sensing the whole of you with no, you know, one part controlling another, the whole power over thing that you speak so much about. And it's the relationship of the slight stretch everywhere with the buoyancy and the lightness.
Does that fit with, I think you called it the alpha functions and the gamma functions, that we
Yes.
are constantly integrating these conscious and unconscious
Yes.
aspects of our movement?
Yes, exactly. The alpha is the surface muscles, the surface gross muscles uh, functioning and saying, yes, do this and carrying it out. And the gamma being the support that takes care of everything behind the scenes. That a lot, like if I lean over here, I think, oh, I'm just leaning here, but there's a lot that has to go on that allows me to do that without me toppling over. So the
Mm.
gamma system is um, not that well talked about, not that much talked about, but definitely we would be lost without it, that's for sure.
So again, it's not giving primacy to the mind and our conscious awareness, but realizing our body is functioning with us, for us, in our awareness, outside our awareness, and how do we hold that wholeness?
Exactly. And like you say, the consciousness that when we allow ourselves to recognize that alive consciousness that is happening all the time, that just, it just makes looking out the window different when I have all of that awareness as part of it. So let's keep going with this. Just want to how to do that. Yeah, okay. Let's look at the different kinds of structural systems that we have. The possibilities are we have a compression system, which is like bricks stacked up. And the other choice is we have a suspension system. And the suspension system, we get our shape, or shape comes from everything being slightly expanded. So often in the movement world, or lots of different teachings these days, people talk about alignment. And alignment implies that you can put one piece on top of another and you will be aligned. And yet, if you've ever looked at a skeleton and you tried to stack it up, it's not possible. We don't stack up that way for a few different reasons. One is that there's no flat surfaces to land on. And also, the weightedness of us tends to be, we're more weighted forward. So if you're riding on a train and you fall asleep, that most people tend to nod off that way. We're weighted more that way. So we don't actually stack up.
Well, and if bones float, then we can't be built on a compression model.
Thank you, Heather. Perfect. Exactly right. So we are this suspended system, which is the tensegrity, the tensional integrity. And we see it in us, and we also see it in the animal kingdom, because if you think about a dinosaur, which I don't know how often anybody thinks about a dinosaur, but when you do, and it's like the dinosaur has his body and it has this neck that's out here. And that neck is sometimes up to 60 feet long. So you got this body here and this neck that's 60 feet long. In mechanics, Newtonian mechanics, that would topple right over. And yet when you take the tensegrity model of expansion, it makes it possible. There's actually a very interesting story that I heard about that. So there was this paleontologist, I guess it would be, a guy who works in a museum and studies dinosaurs. He's working in the museum and he's looking at the dinosaurs, and all the dinosaurs on view are viewed with their tail touching like on their four legs and the tail touching the ground, and they're standing up. And he thought or realized that all the imprints they have on the, cave walls, etc., never show an imprint of a dinosaur tail on the ground. They only show the feet. So he says that the dinosaur tail did not rest on the ground. It was that way. Isn't that interesting?
That's fascinating. Do you think it's helping it balance, or that the
Yes.
tail? Interesting.
Yeah. So it didn't balance by resting on the tail, maybe sometimes, but the actual tensegrity expansion was its natural state.
Mhm.
And if we again take that in to be ours, and again, it's the whole self expands. It's not just the body. It's the mental, physical, emotional, spiritual that feels this connectedness,
And
both
oneness.
and the oneness, both to the ground and to I'm expanding into something that I can feel, or the heavens of how we're affected.
One of the things that you talk about is that we can't expand unless we feel safe.
Right.
So it feels like it also means we need to move beyond the way we traumatize each other or are caught in our own trauma, because then we tend to contract.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. In a way, the wholeness is wonderful. And all this talk of expansion is like, oh yeah, that's beautiful and great. We love that. But trauma tends to fragment or diminish this sense of oneness or self. So most of us are caught with, well, not some people know about that there is this expansion and it's possible and that's available and beautiful. Yet my everyday reality isn't that. And so, what can I do to, it's a conflict, what we know is good for us versus what's actually happening. Like I really appreciated your talk. It was maybe about a month ago when you brought up the personality disorders, the narcissism, and explained all of that. And again, like you clarified that it doesn't need this label, but it's something that's out of balance or off balance or
Yeah, trauma response.
exactly. Yeah. So if we think about it that, we're born and we have these biological needs and the needs are not met often for most of us. And then how do we adjust to that? And it's usually some kind of constriction, adaptive pattern that's molded to fit what's going on. And so how do we realize that there's something else that's possible? So with the tensegrity, we see that one part moves, everything moves. But in the trauma, it's some part is braced,
Mm.
right? Or some part has in tensegrity, every piece is as essential as the next piece.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yet again, in trauma, there's like, something difficult happened over here. So I'm not going to think about that or feel that. And there's
Mhm.
body amnesia or, just not pain. So that's out of the picture. So how does that going to affect the rest?
Yeah.
So there's that piece. And then, we go back to our title, The Lightness of Being. Like, I don't know how much you can tell, but because of the dynamic balance of the expansion and the contraction, this and the elasticity, this is very light.
Mm.
And so the more we can sense that in ourselves, which, well, we could take a moment with that. And you mentioned the safety, and the safety is also related to support. So if we just take a moment to recognize that whatever is under us is supporting
Mm.
us. Because again, we live in a gravitational field. We have the force of gravity coming this way. And again, gravity is not exactly a force and it's not exactly this way, but it does something of this. And then anti-gravity is coming this way. And there is always, 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 always something of this.
Mm.
And so in this moment, when I remember that
Mm.
in not just my physicality, but in, every drop of every atom and molecule that's consciousness related to me and the earth, because I'm connected to the earth. We are. Nobody's not. A few people, have managed to lift, but most of us are on the planet. And so we have the contact with the planet, support of ourselves, and then our environment or what we see. And that's the oneness. Undeniable. Undeniable.
This is beautiful, Betsy. And it feels like part of what you're describing is for us to move into the Aquarian paradigms and new experience of ourselves, that we have to tell a different story about ourselves.
Yes.
We have to get out of that mechanistic view. We also have to get out of that view of idealization of the transcendent
Yeah.
and evaluation of the physical and embodied, to hold that wholeness, to hold the beauty of expansion and higher frequency and higher consciousness and the sacredness of the body and the way they are all conscious and a part of that oneness.
I love how you synthesize and put things together. It's exactly accurate. And as you've said before, and I'm saying today, it's all right here. It's a question of recognizing and remembering, like for whatever reason, we forgot and lost a lot of connection, frequency, vibration, etc. And that doesn't mean it went away. It means that again, back to the God idea, did God disappear or did we go away or God
Yeah.
go away? And all of those
We
questions.
disconnected.
Yeah. And we can connect. And I want to say something that I think is very interesting. I watched your last interview with Jose about the temple. And what struck me, and it has struck me before, there are a few things that I could talk about, but I'm just going to say the one thing that really is looking at the figures, looking at the people. What do those people look like? And I thought, why is nobody paying attention? Why are we doing yoga? Why aren't we doing Egypt body? You know, I mean, they're all standing quite upright. There's no depictions of that. Nobody looks like that. I think that's so interesting. And the most interesting thing is when he explained the sequence of life and the baby, and then the toddler and the grow and the adolescent and going. And when he got to the old man, if it was a modern day, especially I want to say American, the old man would have looked like that.
Slumped over.
The old man in the Egypt picture is absolutely upright. They implied that he was old by him having a cane.
That is great, Betsy. And you know what's interesting about that is it brings back into remembrance that the ancient Egyptian understanding of alignment was not building things piece on piece, but the straightness of the spine
Yes,
coming into that uh, alignment that allows us to remember the spaciousness and wholeness of who we are and our connection with the earth and sky.
absolutely. Absolutely. And when you sort of think about it, you think like, oh yeah, like how could it be any other way? The whole nervous system goes through the spine, the whole, everything comes out. It's like, yeah, it's important. It's 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 a foundational something for us to, and as I was saying before, we have access to it. We have access to it. And I'd be the first to admit, not always easy to, come in touch with the physicality or the trauma patterns that become physical. Not always easy, but possible.
Two other techniques that you talk about that I think are valuable in helping us come back into connection. I love in the book how you talk about if you feel an emotion, pay attention to where you experience that in your body.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
again, that's bringing you back into more of that awareness of the interconnectedness of mind, body, emotions, spirit.
Yes, yes. And kind of related to our topic today, the lightness of being, where do you feel the heaviness in your body, which might be the same place as that emotion? And then feeling where is that heaviness? And for a lot of people, it's here, the heart, our hearts get hurt. It doesn't take much, but we get pain here. But again, going back to the support, okay, the chair is under me, the earth, the planet is here supporting me. Okay, there's a breath. Okay,
Mm.
it's not fully gone, but it's a little less pull on me. And if we can do those small interventions or paying attention to ourselves, whatever we want to call it, then they add up. And that's, I think, what we're being called to now. That's where we're going. There's a beautiful quote by Hafez. Um, the light, the light will someday split you open, even if your life is now a cage.
Mm. Wow.
And aren't we all in a bit of a cage? And that light is just waiting in here and out here for us.
And we are getting inundated now with energies, solar energies, cosmic energies that are supporting us in letting the light in.
Exactly.
And you talk about 50-50 awareness,
Yes.
which I love. How do we be aware of what's coming in, what's from the outside informing us? And then how do we stay aware within ourselves
Right.
and
Because
hold that balance?
exactly, because most of us are in one or the other. It's like, oh, I'm on the computer, I'm doing, I'm totally in the computer, and then realize, oh, my back hurts, and it's like, oh, my back, it's a separate thing. And nobody sort of puts together that it's because I'm here and doing that, that my back is doing that. And it's like, we got to do a bit more of that, sort of open our eyes to see the obvious. But again, as we've been talking about, I want to say it's not our fault that we can't see it because we've been trained not to see it.
Yes, yes.
We've been like told not seeing it is a good thing, work, every hour of the day and make money and be, and doesn't matter what happens to you, that's been sold. A bill of goods is good. And we're saying, no, listen, what's happening to you?
So then the body becomes the sacred messenger. That pain in the back is saying, you're out of balance.
Yes, Heather. Yes. And most of us shoot the messenger. Get rid of that pain. Just, go have back surgery right away. I'm not saying some people don't need it, but sometimes it's like, huh, could that pain be from what I just did?
Mm.
And do I have a tendency toward that back pain because when I was a child, this and this happened in the posture I took, compressed my back a little, and now I'm just adding to it with more compression because somebody else could sit here all day and not have back pain. Why do I have back pain? And start to, again, the stuff is coming to us all the time.
And honor it, pay
Honor it.
attention to it.
Yeah, whatever we can, and compassion for what we can't.
One other technique you talk about, Betsy, that I love is about breathing. And one of the things that you emphasize is that, again, our tendency is the inhale is important, which I think is very symbolic. What am I taking in?
Right.
You talk about how important the exhale is. Can you say more about that? And I think that's a meditation practice in and of itself.
Totally. Yes. Rarely do I start a class of any sort without a breathing practice. Always, always. And it's interesting because I just connected up what you just said with again Keone's talk about the fall and the us attaching to things and sort of grabbing for things. And I just put that together with my thought about the inhale. So thank you for that. Um, so we again, there's so many reasons for that I need more, I want more, inhale. In singing, they say tank up, you know. But what really wants to happen is, and what's really important is the exhale. Because what happens is that most people don't exhale completely. And if we don't exhale completely, there is stale air left in the lungs. And with that stale air, there's less oxygen. And so the system reads, oh, we need oxygen. So you take another breath, but it can't really go in because you've already got this stale air here. So it gets more stale air on top of stale air. And you never really let the air out to allow the fresh, rich oxygen to come in and travel into those. Now I have the picture of the fascial pathways that, but of course it's the capillaries in the blood and the oxygen moving through. And the other piece of that now is that there's a lot of research done with the vagus nerve. And there's quite a few practices that talk about as you exhale more completely, the vagus nerve engages. So again, that goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, the vagus nerve, 80%. I mean, now that we come back to that idea, is in the physicality of our body, sending messages up. Oh, this is happening. Oh, this is happening. And so with that longer exhale, we get more of these messages. This is what's happening. So it's, and last one is that as you exhale really completely, just even try this exhale, 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 exhale until so you don't stop. Most people stop their exhale at a certain point. Don't. Keep your exhale going. Exhale, exhale, exhale. And then, poof, spontaneous inhale, which is what you want. You will never have to take another breath.
Yeah, I love this, Betsy, and it feels so metaphorical and so symbolic that we need to release what's stale, what no longer serves us, let it go.
Yes.
And then what we need comes to us.
In every moment. And I'm not implying that I can do this. Sometimes when we talk about these things, people think like, oh, that person must, but I'm with everybody else.
But you've made a lifetime of staying in that awareness and
Yes.
coming back into that attunement and teaching others how to do that, which is part of what guides us into our wholeness, into our reconnecting with ourselves.
Yeah,
And I also love that the exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system.
exactly.
So it helps us calm down.
Exactly.
And in a way, it takes us out of the storm and cacophony around us back into stillness.
Exactly. Take it one step further. If we add to the exhale a hum, now a lot of people know about the hum now, but the reason, or one of the reasons the hum is so important, or well, let's just everybody just do one, just so when I say this, you'll see if you can. Sometimes the hum doesn't come across but if we just do, mm, mm, So what happens, the hum produces what's called nitric oxide. And what does nitric oxide do? Nitric oxide dilates blood vessels. So again, it feeds the expansion, the expanded self.
Beautiful, Betsy. All these very clear ways that we can come back into reconnection. And as we come back into that consciousness of the community within us, the
Yes.
diversity and unity of who we each are, it becomes a template that supports us in coming back into that awareness that we're all interconnected with each other and all that is.
Yes.
And perhaps before we end, we can talk about the importance of love and how you talk about love is the training for all of us in this human experience, because it does bring us back into connection and into oneness.
Right, right. And just the idea of the connection in myself spreading to the connection in you, and everybody who will hear this, is that almost overwhelming love, the oneness. And again, it's from the earth, as much as we've harmed the earth, etc. It still has that love. So it's again the planet, us, and the beauty of the movement of the constellations and the stars, that overwhelming heart connection that is available.
And that ultimately activates the lightness of being. I mean, that is Ma'at, and the heart that's no longer heavy, but is as light as the feather. That is what allows us that lightness of being in every sense. And then we emanate that out to all around us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, yes. So that's why all the different perspectives meet in that place. And however, if somebody comes in, and Ma'at makes sense to them, great. Somebody else comes in and says tensegrity, physicality makes sense, great. Somebody else comes in and says Hafiz's thoughts, great. However anybody um, is attracted or can open a door to the oneness, the love, that is available. Like, great.
It fits with what you talk about in the book, that what is the right way to meditate? The right way to meditate is whatever way works for you.
Exactly. And when you think about it, who are we to say, like, this is the right way? That just goes back to the whole power over thing, with the Pluto and Aquarius and, all of that. It's like, um, that's power over. We're not going there as much as we can. Again, not so easy. But
So before we end, Betsy, any other thoughts about your own intuition or sense of what we're moving into as we move into this lightness of being, move into this paradigm of the Aquarian age and new way of being?
yeah, I guess I would have to sort of well, I'll tell you this piece. I was recently talking with Rory Duff, and he's the person that, for those of you who don't know, he discovers or talks about the ley lines, the energy lines of the earth. And they meet at these places called nodes. And he was saying that when they meet at nodes, um, there's like a column, and around it is a shape, and it has sort of a contraction and expansion.
Wow.
And I said, that's the tensegrity. That's the tensegrity. So I think for me, and he also talks about that in I don't remember his timing, that the ley lines are getting bigger. And so there's that, and there's our awareness of our, like you mentioned, like the medical model, like that might not be, the mechanistic and all, where people are questioning it. No question about that. And the more the what do you call the Kuiper Belt objects and the different planetary um, influences and the solar flares and everything, just all of that. It's
Mm.
it's so big and yet so real and so like, of course, that's what's going on. And that's I think the direction we're heading in for the age of Aquarius,
Mm.
that oneness or the unity somehow.
So, with what you're saying, we can follow the path to that oneness, to that centeredness through witnessing the movement of the stars and planets or attuning to the cells and functioning of our own bodies. It's within us, it's all around us. When we open our awareness and come back into presence, you talk about that in the book a lot too,
Uh,
come back into awareness and remembering, then it's in us and all around us.
exactly, exactly. And you have to work hard to not let it in. That's why I think people are so tired. Fibromyalgia, all the tiredness, illnesses. You're tired of blocking things.
Well, thank you, Betsy, for this amazing conversation. And hopefully, we will continue to have these conversations because you are really sharing your wisdom and experience from years of working with that attunement and supporting people and coming back into harmony, coming back into balance, and really understanding that interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, thank you, Heather. Thank you for recognizing all of that. And again, thank you for um, just being uh, a platform, or a platform sounds too, I don't know the word, but being a channel or an opening or a goddess, I was of this what's coming. So
A messenger of the oneness. How about that?
messenger of the oneness. That's good. I wasn't that far off with goddess.
Thank
Messenger of the
you.
oneness.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you to all who are listening, and how together we are coming back into that remembering and reconnection and oneness. Blessed be.